This week on For the Record, presidential candidates descend on the Quad Cities. Why Rand Paul says he should be the Republican nominee. What Rick Santorum says is the key to job growth. And Bernie Sanders draws a crowd. How he plans to beat the odds. Bernie Sanders, our special guest in studio.
Local for you. From the heart of the Quad Cities, your local election headquarters presents For the Record. And now, here's your host, Jim Niedelman.
Hello everyone, I'm Jim Niedelman and this is For the Record. We've seen the presidential race pick up steam around the Quad Cities this week. 3 candidates held their big kickoff events. 2 of them are already making the rounds in Iowa. One of them is Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont. Along the way, he managed to stop by here and go over the issues of the day with us for the record. It's great to see you here, Senator. Thanks for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
How many times have you been told you can't win?
Throughout my entire political career. Interesting you asked that question, Jim.
Well, there are a lot of experts, the so-called experts, say you can't. If you'll indulge me for a moment, I'll pick some points and you can tell me why they're all wrong.
Okay.
That you can't win. 1, you're not Hillary Clinton. She's so far out in the polls in Iowa and New Hampshire. She's in the 60% range. You're in the 15 to 18% range. Polls from the Quinnipiac about 3 weeks ago, of course, they're not most timely, most recent. But why are those wrong?
Well, first of all, let me agree. I am not Hillary Clinton. No ifs, buts, and maybes about that. Second of all, what the polls here in Iowa and what the polls around the country show, to the degree that polling means anything, is that we're moving up pretty quickly. Hillary Clinton is maybe the best known woman in the entire world. And I would guess 50-60% of the people of Iowa don't even know who Bernie Sanders is, let alone what I believe in. So I think as we get around the state, and we will be getting around the state, and we'll be going, I come from a rural state. We have towns of 100 people. I visit those towns. We hold meetings in those towns. So we're going to get around the state. And I think the more people become familiar with Bernie Sanders, they hear what I have to say, the better we're going to do. And I think we got a real shot to win this state.
Well, there are those who say you really don't want to win because you're just in the race to influence the debate, raise the issues that you're passionate about, maybe just trying to get the VP nod. Wrong?
Wrong. We are in this race to win, but the way we win, you see, is not getting involved in political gossip or negative advertising. I've never done a negative ad in my life. The way you, in fact, win elections, at least in my experience, is you talk about the real issues impacting working families.
You've been an outspoken independent your entire career. You can't win because now you're saying you're proudly a democratic socialist, political blasphemy.
Well, I think what people have to know is what that term means. And I look at countries like Denmark and Sweden and Finland, Norway, parts of Europe, who have had social democratic governments. And what they have managed to accomplish in those countries is health care for all people as a right, and doing it in a lot more cost-effective way than we do. In many of those countries, do you know how much the cost of college education is? It is 0. They have stronger child care programs than we have. Their minimum wage is higher than ours is. So I think it is important for our country to learn from other countries around the world.
But even if you win the nomination, you would get hammered by Republicans. So this is the term socialist in every ad around the country.
Okay, well, you go and you ask people in Iowa, and you ask people in Vermont, any place else, should the wealthiest people in this country start paying their fair share of taxes? Or do we continue a system where the billionaires and the large corporations stash their money in the Cayman Islands and don't pay anything in taxes? You know what the American people say? Let's do it. They should pay their fair share of taxes.
But it'd be hard to overcome the label. I mean, there's going to be a label on Bernie Sanders.
Well, I think, look, I did win my last election in Vermont with 71% of the vote. And I did defeat, before that, one of the wealthiest guys in the state of Vermont by a 2-to-1 margin. When people hear what you have to say, I think the label becomes less important.
Well, you can't win because the fundraising challenge is too great.
Okay. Their question. And you know what? Maybe they're right. Maybe we have reached the stage in American society where the billionaires have it all, and their candidates are going to win. What I can simply tell you is that as of now, we have over 120,000 contributors who have gone to BernieSanders.com and made an average contribution of $40. And in fact, you're right, it will be very hard to take on the super PACs. I don't have a super PAC.
You're not doing super PACs. $1.5 billion to $2 billion to win a race these days.
It's unbelievable. So the only way we win is if millions of people say enough is enough, the billionaires should not be electing the next president of the United States. We want somebody who's going to represent us. But I got to be very frank with you. This is a huge impediment, but it's not just for me. Can any candidate who is not dependent on the billionaire class win elections?
No soft money issue campaign that says friends of Bernie Sanders going to get on the act for you?
We will not support any super PAC, period.
All right. What about those who say you can't win because you're too old? You've heard this one before, I'm sure. You're 73 now, 75.
Excuse me, I felt, what was that you said?
75 by Inauguration Day, oldest elected president in U.S. history. And you could probably beat me in a race around the block, I'll grant you that.
Well, I may. I used to be a distance runner. I was a pretty good cross-country.
But, you know, people might, I mean,
Yeah,
Reagan
I
was 69.
It's an issue. Look, all I can tell you is, thank God, I have been blessed with good health. I don't think I've missed a day to sickness since I've been in the United States Senate, which is now 9 years. I have a lot of endurance. Watch me on the campaign trail, and you know, my health is good. And so that's all I can say.
You know, your age was the most Googled question the first 24 hours after your initial announcement. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Did you know what the second one was?
What?
About religion. They're asking about religion. You are, some people might say that's the reason you can't win. You're the son of Jewish parents. You are culturally Jewish, but not religiously Jewish. That's not to say you shouldn't or couldn't because of this by any stretch of the imagination. The question really is the American public at large at a point where this isn't an issue to them?
I think, I'll tell you something, Jim, we have come a long, long way, you know, in the last many years. And I think it's fair to say that if you and I were sitting here 30 years ago and we said, well, we're going to have an African-American president of the United States in 2008. And by the way, the great state of Iowa played a leading role in that. An almost all-white state that said, yeah, we can support somebody based on his ideas, not his color of his skin. So I think as a nation we have overcome that type of stuff, and I don't think that will be an impediment.
One more reason you can't win, and you've already kind of touched on this.
Gee, you've discouraged me already. I'm walking out of here.
You've got to defend yourself, and you're doing a great job, I would say. You promised not to air negative campaign ads. You promised not to do that.
And I know. Now your station is very opposed to me here because I'm not going to flood the airwaves, raise your salary with my negative ads. Look, I have never run a negative political ad in my entire life. People of Vermont understand that. You know why? I don't think they work. I know
political scientists disagree with you entirely.
They
say
that's
they work.
Fine. I know. And believe me, you and I have seen 1 or 2 negative ads, right?
A few hundred thousand.
Okay, and that's all. I am going to tell the people of Iowa and the people of America what I believe in, what I want to do, and I'm not going to rip apart my opponents and tell you they're the worst people in the history of the world. They're not. You know, they have their views, I have my views. Let the American people decide which views make more sense to them.
All right, well, one thing you've certainly done time and time again to people who have doubted you is prove them wrong. We have a lot more to talk about with Senator Bernie Sanders, what programs he's pushing and how he's relying on them to be the proof he can win. For the Record.
For the Record now continues.
Bernie Sanders had company on the campaign trail through Davenport. Kentucky Senator Rand Paul made 2 stops, one of them at modern Woodman Park, where he tried to set himself apart from the other Republicans in the race while pushing the common party themes of lower taxes and less government regulation. He also highlighted his opposition to the Patriot Act and bulk data collection by the NSA. Senator Paul said he would have to take a long look before sending troops into what he called the cesspool situation in the Middle East. He maintains he's the Republicans' best chance.
For those of you who don't remember, the Democrats won the last 2 times here. It's not just about the primary, it's about winning the general election. I'm the only one beating Hillary Clinton in Colorado, Iowa, Pennsylvania, and New Hampshire.
Former Pennsylvania Senator Rick Santorum came through Davenport the same week he launched his campaign. He slammed the Obama administration, saying the leaders of the country don't love the country. Santorum won the Iowa caucuses in 2012 for the Republicans. He's now pushing a flat tax to boost the economy.
The bottom line is grow the economy, and workers with skills will do well. The question is, when you grow that economy, to make sure you're growing it in areas particularly that are going to create opportunities for lower skilled workers also to be able to run.
Will now make it 8 Republicans in the race for president. Former New York Governor George Pataki decided to make a run. His announcement came in the Republican birthplace of Exeter, New Hampshire. He's focusing his early campaign in that state. It's not clear if he'll focus much on Iowa. His campaign is considered a long shot bid and might not be strong enough to get invited to the first Republican debate. Only the top 10 in the polls will be included in that. Well, we've got a very crowded Republican field that will likely only get more crowded. It's quieter for the Democrats with only 2 officially in the race. We're back with one of them, Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont. Senator, how big do you think the field is going to get for the Democrats? Do you think it will get to 5 or 6?
Well, I think former Governor O'Malley is going to jump in. Jim Webb is in already. And Link Chafee, I think, is going to be in as well.
Earlier this week at your big kickoff in Vermont, you said we need a major federal jobs program to put millions back to work. This is your infrastructure plan. Here are some of the grades the American Society of Civil Engineers gives the country in different categories. A lot of D's, D minuses, D pluses. We see wastewater, streets, energy, schools, drinking water. This is something you're a big advocate for, though you want to spend $1 trillion. People might say it sounds like a stimulus plan on steroids. And what do you tell people who thought the last one was a waste of money?
Well, it wasn't a waste of money. I mean, I know there was a lot of Republican propaganda. Look, when Obama came into office, we were losing 800,000 jobs a month, and our financial system was on the verge of collapse. I could tell you that in the state of Vermont, that stimulus package helped us build roads, build bridges, improve childcare, improve Head Start, move us to sustainable energy, and created thousands of jobs at a time when we desperately needed those jobs.
Your position that didn't go far enough, you actually criticized it for being weak.
Absolutely. Look, what you just showed your viewers is that our infrastructure is crumbling. This is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We used to have an infrastructure that was the envy of other countries. Today, what the American Society of Civil Engineers tell us is that it is falling apart. So yes, when we invest in roads and bridges and water systems and wastewater plants and in airports and in rail, by the way, you are going to create millions of decent paying jobs, making our country stronger, more productive, and safer. Yeah, I believe in that.
How do you pay for it, though? It's $1 trillion is a lot of money.
Well, in a sense, it certainly is a lot of money. But we're going to pay for it by developing a tax system in this country which is fair, which asks that the wealthiest people and the largest corporations start paying their fair share of taxes. Right now, we're losing over $100 billion every year because these corporations stash their money in the Cayman Islands and other tax havens. You have hedge fund managers paying a lower effective tax rate than you do. We are wealthy. The problem is that almost all of the wealth rests in the hands of the few, and these people are going to have to accept their responsibilities and start paying their fair share of taxes.
And you want to fix streets, bridges, interstates, water systems, even
Absolutely.
Energy grids, all that sort of thing?
Yes, absolutely.
Earlier this year, you held a town hall at the University of Iowa. A question of military spending came from the crowd. You said the Department of Defense needs to be audited, there's contractor fraud, and that judicious cuts need to be made to the military. What kind of number does judicious cuts amount to in a $600 billion defense budget?
Well, this is what I would say, is no one denies that there is massive amounts of waste within the Department of Defense. They cannot deal with an independent audit. That doesn't happen. That there are cost overruns into the tunes of tens and tens of billions of dollars. That's one issue. And the second issue really has to do with how our defense policy echoes our foreign policy. I voted against the war in Iraq, and I think that history will record that as the right vote. I do not want to see us in perpetual warfare in the Middle East. So we need the strongest defense possible in order to protect our people and work with our allies around the world. But we should not be carrying the entire burden for the Middle East, for example, alone. Other countries have got to contribute, especially the Muslim countries in the area. So judicious
Can you put
cuts,
a number on the cuts?
No, I can't. Not right now. It's something that you need to bring your military people around.
This is a tricky issue in this area because members of Congress from both parties locally here are very protective of their military installations. We have one here, the Rock Island Arsenal. Right. And so when they hear the potential of military cuts, they think, well, what's going to happen to the Rock Island Arsenal? It's a major economic drive here, 7,000 jobs. And I know the criticism is that the military is just one big jobs program. Well, yes, and people rely on those jobs. Right. So what are the people we're going to say, we hear the NIMBY when you hear nuclear plants and things like that, not in my backyard. Well, here it's keep it in my backyard. Right. And, how worried should people here be about the Rock Island Arsenal and Doris Sanders administration?
Well, that's not a question that anyone can answer. Obviously, we want to make sure that the military jobs, people producing for the military, by the way, are done in the United States and not in other countries, which is a factor, that we want to make sure that these people are paid decently. But I think we can't comment on every military installation or production facility in the country. But obviously, I will do my best. What this whole campaign is about is making sure that we have decent paying jobs in the United States of America.
All right, let's switch subject to health care, one of your passionate issues as well. You want health care for all. How much do taxes have to go up to pay for this?
We have a dysfunctional healthcare system, 35 million without any health insurance, more who are underinsured. Our healthcare results are not particularly good, and yet we are spending almost twice as much per capita as do the people of any other country, all who have national healthcare programs. So yes, I believe that healthcare is a right. I believe we should move to a Medicare for all single-payer program established at the statewide, administered at the statewide levels that will be much more cost-effective than the current system, which is dominated by private insurance companies who are looking for more and more profits, drug companies that charge us the highest prices.
You want to put the insurance companies out of business?
Private insurance companies, yes.
Why not work within the Affordable Care Act if it survives the latest Supreme Court decision?
Well, I voted for the Affordable Care Act and played an important role in creating many, many hundreds of community health centers all over this country, and I'm very concerned about primary health care. I think the Affordable Care Act is a very, very complicated piece of legislation. I want something which is simpler, less bureaucratic, more cost-effective.
You also have a college for all plan, would pay for students to go to community college, public university, four-year schools as well.
4 year of public colleges and universities.
All right. Well, you want to finance this through financial transactions, taxing stock trades, bond trades, derivative trades, all those sorts of things. Projected $300 billion a year, I believe. Right. A great applause line, but can you really get this through Congress without interference from the big bank lobby? Right. Big bank lobby.
Let's be clear. There is nothing significant that would benefit working families, whether it is making tuition free in public colleges and universities, rebuilding our infrastructure and creating millions of jobs, raising the minimum wage to a living wage, asking the wealthy to stop paying their fair share. Nothing will be happening unless millions of people in America stand up and say, enough is enough. The billionaires and their lobbyists cannot determine what happens in Washington.
Back to college for all, though. When you talk about paying for four years, I assume, is there a limit? Because when I went to school, I went through 4 years,
college.
but there were guys on 8, 9, 10-year plans. That screams for abuse. Like, there were people out there. What are you going to do about those people?
It's for college, yeah.
For 4 years of college.
Yeah. Well, I think the states will have something to say about that as well. It's going to be a matching program, $2 from the federal government, $1 from the state.
All right, well, you kind of touched on this already, but you want to address income inequality by raising the minimum wage, taxing the wealthy. You even mentioned a 90% rate.
No.
For the highest earners?
No.
For the highest earners?
No, I didn't say that at all. That's, in fact, what was under that great communist
Eisenhower.
Eisenhower. So we are going to come up during this campaign. We're going to run an issue-oriented campaign. I'm not into political gossip. We're going to throw issues out there. We're going to debate those issues. People like you will ask me questions about that. We are going to have a progressive tax system.
You want to close tax loopholes?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, how does President Bernie Sanders get any of these things done in Congress in today's congressional gridlock? Can you do it without Democratic majorities?
Yeah, you could do it. The way you do it is, in a sense, the way I function as mayor of the city of Burlington. I think we rallied the people of Burlington. We've got to rally the American people to say, excuse me, Mr. Congressman, my kid should be going to college, and you're going to have to vote for that piece of legislation. We know what's going on. Or, yeah, my sister needs a job, and you're going to have to help us rebuild the infrastructure and get her work. When the American people are aroused and involved, you would be surprised as to what can happen.
Do you need a massive coattail effect? You can do it without a coattail effect, because you would need, 29 Democratic gains in the House, 16 in the Senate for a filibuster majority.
Let me just say this to be very clear. I know I'll offend half your viewers here. But the Republican Party over the last number of years has moved very, very far to the right. And if you look at the Republican budget, it is tax breaks for billionaires, raising taxes on working people, massive cuts in Medicare, Medicaid, the repeal of the Affordable Care Act.
But they're winning elections too, though, right?
They did very well, but they did very well, and that's true. They did very well when voter turnout was very low. And my job is to see that working people, young people stand up and say, you know what? We're going to take an active role in our democracy. We are going to participate. We are going to vote. All
right, well, here's how the U.S. ranks in the world of some key quality of life areas. Educational attainment, 14th. Infrastructure, 16th. Life expectancy, 42nd. Infant mortality, 55th, and of the 11 wealthiest countries, the United States comes in last for healthcare systems. You're aware of most of these things. We used to be a lot better in a lot of these categories. Every politician I can remember running for president says America's best years are still ahead of us. Do you believe that?
If we get our act together, absolutely. I mean, there's nothing that we can't accomplish. That is a really sad list of areas that we are falling way behind the world.
How is that possible given that downward trend, though?
I'll tell you
every politician has to say that, it sounds like.
I know, but let me tell you something else, which every politician will not tell you. In fact, nobody else will tell you. What we have seen in the last 30 years is a massive transfer of wealth from the middle class and working families to the top 0.1%. And in my view, and I will be the only candidate who will tell you this, that's just not acceptable.
That brings us to our question of the week. We want to know what you think about Senator Bernie Sanders' policies in his campaign for president. You can send your answer by email to fortherecord@whbf.com or respond to this post on Facebook at the WHBF TV page or on my page. We've got one more thing to talk about with Senator Sanders a little later regarding a possible secret campaign weapon. Next up, our panel discussion for the record.
You're watching For the Record. Once again, here is your host, Jim Niedelman.
Welcome back. Here's our panel for this week. On the left, former Illinois Congressman Phil Hare. On the right, publisher of the River Cities Reader, Todd McGreevy. Thank you both for your time.
Thank you.
We'll get right to it. Bernie Sanders, a long interview, talks about things in the ways that nobody else seems to. Healthcare for all, college for all. Aren't these likable policies, Mr. McGreevy?
Who doesn't want health care for all? Who doesn't want education for all? I think the challenge comes in how do you pay for it? How do you get it through Congress as you attempt to approach that? As a form, I think he was in this Congress for 16 years, in the Senate for almost 8 now. I think what is important to note is that Congress doesn't hold the agency's feet to the fire with regards to accountability, and that's what I'd like to see. We'd like to see the discussion go.
Everyone paints him as extreme. It's hard not to when he describes himself as a socialist. If he won the nomination, could he or would he make that shift to try to the middle, as they say, that needs to be done to win a general election, Congressman?
Well, I'm not big on classifying people left, right, center, whatever. But what these elections are really supposed to be about is where are you on the issues? If you take the name or of any candidate away and you talk about what do you stand for, and in this case, I think Senator Sanders talked about infrastructure. Every dollar that I served on the Transportation Committee in the House. And every dollar we invest in infrastructure, the government gets back $5 to $7. Now, who wouldn't want that kind of investment? He talked about health care for all. We are seeing tremendous gaps in coverage for people, even with this Affordable Care Act, which I voted for, probably cost me my job. But the point is, there are still a lot of people who didn't get health care that are getting it.
What hurts him the most, in this whole process?
Well, I think what they're going to do, and which is typical, they do this a lot, and by they I mean the opponents maybe from his own party or certainly from the Republicans. They're going to label him as this extremist. He's out of touch. He doesn't understand it. He doesn't get it. Well, I think it's these folks that don't understand and don't get it.
Does the early primary schedule kind of set up favorably for him? Democrats in Iowa will pay attention. They gave Barack Obama the victory 8 years ago. New Hampshire right after that, next to his home state of Vermont. He's popular there. Can he build momentum to make a real challenge to Hillary Clinton?
In Iowa, I think he can, and he made the point that maybe 60-80% of Iowans don't know him yet, but he's going to spend some time here, and he's used to dealing with the rural America, and Iowa's a manageable crucible for him to get his message out. And so I think Iowans will open their ears and listen.
He can build some momentum, you think?
Oh, I absolutely do. I absolutely do.
Congressman Hare, Senator Sanders promises no negative ads. As someone who's ran and held public office, how realistic is that for him to mount a strong challenge?
I think it's refreshing to hear any candidate say they're not going to do it. As a beneficiary of some very nasty ads when I ran for re-election, I can tell you that demonizing somebody is not what the American people want. They want to know where are you on these issues, whether they agree or disagree. And certainly you ought to be able to run an ad and talk about what you believe in. Now, if people don't like your position on an issue, that's fine. This is why we have a democracy. But if you have to demonize somebody to the point where every time they open up their mouth, you're flipping what they say and they go on the defense, that's not what politics should be about.
Well, he's been labeled everything in the book in his career. And even in his own party, he's been an independent. So the Democrats have come at him too, as well as Republicans. He survived election after election. Would negative ads work on him? If someone after him...
Number one, I don't think he's going to have to run negative ads.
No, I'm saying somebody going after him negatively.
I think that would just make him more viable because somebody is targeting him with a negative ad. And while it's an excellent high moral ground to take that he's not going to run negative ads, and I applaud him for that, he won't have to. There'll be plenty of people running plenty of negative ads against his opponents.
The Sanders campaign raised $1.5 million in its first 24 hours after launch. That's the best for the launches yet of all even of the Republican candidates. Can he make it only on his vow to take small individual donations, no super PAC money? We're talking $1.5 billion to $2 billion they're saying to win this election. No super PAC money. Can it be done?
I think, yes, it can. I think if you look at the late Senator Paul Wellstone, here was a man who wasn't given...
But this is the President of the United States.
Yeah, but my point is, he did it with small givers, and he did it by going out and talking issues to people. I think the American people are fed up with somebody standing there with a big grin on their face saying, I castrated hogs. Terrific. But where do you stand on health care? Where do you stand on putting people back to work? Where do you stand on the national defense of this country? What should we do with ISIS? All these different...
But don't you have to have the money to make people pay attention?
Well, I think you do, but you also need boots on the ground in states like we talked about.
Well, that's money too. Right.
Yeah, but I think he will have a large volunteer base in these early states where the rubber will meet the road is in states after that, like after South Carolina, like Florida, where you're going to...
He uses the term billionaire class in his approach to this, and while it is not laudable that it takes $1 billion to get elected in the United States executive branch. The billionaire class works both ways. It's not just the Koch brothers. You have Soros on the other side.
Yes, there are billionaires on both sides. Probably more on the Republican side, to be fair, but
not
yes.
necessarily. I think if you actually looked at the stats, it surprised most Americans.
All right, well, Todd McGreevy and Congressman Phil Hare, great discussion as always with both of you. Straight ahead, a strategy for Bernie Sanders you haven't heard yet.